She grabbed his arm in the parking garage at 11:47 p.m., slammed him against the concrete pillar, and pressed a white envelope into his chest. "Take the money, Mr. Brooks. $10 million. Walk away. And never contact my daughter again." Ethan didn't even open it. He let it fall to the ground. That woman, Margaret Sterling, one of the most powerful matriarchs in American business, stared at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. But Ethan Brooks didn't flinch, because 24 hours earlier, Victoria Sterling, billionaire, CEO, untouchable perfect, had sat across from him in a dimly lit kitchen, hands shaking around a coffee mug, and whispered 4 words that changed everything. "Ethan, I'm pregnant." And the world they both knew. It was already gone. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss what comes next. Ethan Brooks hadn't worn a tie in 3 years. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fumbling with the knot for the 4th time, and caught a glimpse of himself really looked for the first time in longer than he could remember. The gray creeping into his temples. The tiredness behind his eyes that sleep couldn't fix anymore. 35 years old and already looking like a man who'd made peace with a smaller life. "Dad." He turned. Ava stood in the doorway in her pajamas, arms crossed, watching him with that look she had, the one that was pure Claire, that steady, patient look that said, "I see exactly what you're doing, and I'm waiting for you to admit it." "You're going to the gala," she said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus practically begged me. It's a charity event, Bug, for the Children's Hospital." "You hate events like that." "I don't hate them." She raised one eyebrow. He turned back to the mirror. "Okay, I hate them." "So why are you going?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was complicated. Marcus, his college roommate and current colleague, had been pushing him out of the apartment for months. "You're 35, Ethan. You're not dead. You need to be around people." Ethan had pushed back every time, but this week, something had cracked. Maybe it was the morning he'd made Ava's lunch, walked back through the apartment, and stood in the kitchen for a full 4 minutes, just standing there. Not thinking, not doing, just standing in the silence and feeling the full weight of how quiet everything had become. He'd called Marcus that afternoon. "I'll go to your stupid gala." Now he looked at his daughter and said simply, "Because your Aunt Denise is watching you tonight, and you're going to stay up past your bedtime watching nature documentaries, and I deserve at least one free evening without worrying about you." Ava smiled small and private the way she always smiled when she knew she'd won something without trying. "Your tie is crooked," she said. She walked over, reached up. She was getting tall. God, when did that happen? And fixed it with a precision that shouldn't belong to a 9-year-old. Then she stepped back and assessed him like he was a project. "You look nice, Dad." He kissed the top of her head. "Don't stay up past midnight." She was already walking back to her room. "No promises." The Sterling Global Charity Gala was held at the Meridian Grand, a venue so polished it practically repelled normal people. Ethan arrived 20 minutes late, handed his coat to a woman who looked at it like it had personally offended her, and immediately found Marcus at the bar. "You actually came," Marcus said, genuinely surprised. "You said free food." "I said catered dinner for 300. There's a difference." Ethan grabbed a water glass, scanned the room. Crystal chandeliers, men in custom suits, women in dresses that cost more than his monthly rent. Every conversation happening at arm's length, careful and curated, like everyone was performing a version of themselves they'd rehearsed. He felt the familiar urge to leave. "Relax," Marcus said quietly. "It's just people. Rich people. Rich people with causes. There's a difference." Marcus nodded subtly across the room. "And there's the woman of the hour, Victoria Sterling. You know who she is?" Ethan looked. She was standing near the far wall, flanked by 2 men in identical dark suits, who were clearly staff, not friends. She was holding a champagne glass she hadn't touched. Wearing a black dress that was elegant and deliberately understated, the kind of choice that said, "I don't need to try." Her dark hair was pulled back, posture perfect. And yet, something was off. He couldn't explain it. She was performing composure the way he'd been performing fine for 3 years. He recognized the effort. The very specific exhaustion of holding yourself together in public while something underneath was fraying. "Yeah," he said. "I know who she is. 3 billion in assets, CEO, at 28 youngest woman to lead a Fortune 100 company." Marcus rattled off. "Basically royalty." "Looks lonely," Ethan said without thinking. Marcus glanced at him. "That's an odd thing to say." "Forget it." He hadn't planned to talk to her. It happened the way most things in Ethan's life happened after Claire died. Not through intention, but through the slow gravity of circumstance. He'd stepped outside to the terrace for air away from the noise, and she was already there. Standing at the railing with her champagne glass, looking out at the city lights with an expression that wasn't peaceful, it was empty, like someone who'd turned off a screen. He almost turned around. "You don't have to leave," she said without looking at him. He stopped. "I didn't want to intrude." "You're not intruding. You're just outside. That's allowed." A pause. "I think. Let me check with my PR team." He wasn't expecting that. He laughed a real one short and surprised. She turned then and looked at him with something like relief, like she'd been testing whether he was capable of being a normal human being, and he'd passed. "Victoria Sterling," she said. "I know. Ethan Brooks." She shook his hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes where he noticed this and immediately told himself to stop noticing it extraordinary. Dark and tired, and sharper than anything in the room behind them. "You were looking at me earlier," she said. "Not accusatory, just factual. Sorry, that was—" "You don't have to apologize. Most people look at me. They're usually calculating something." She tilted her head slightly. "You weren't." "What was I doing? Wondering what was wrong with me?" The accuracy of it silenced him for a moment. "That's forward. It's my company's event, and I've shaken 300 hands tonight and had 4 conversations about the second quarter projections." She turned back toward the city. "I've earned forward." He joined her at the railing, leaving appropriate distance between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was strangely comfortable, the silence of 2 people who were both tired of talking. Then she said quietly, "You lost someone." His chest tightened. "What?" "The way you hold yourself. Like you're carrying something that's not going anywhere." She wasn't looking at him when she said it. "I've seen it in the mirror." He was quiet for a long time. "My wife," he finally said. 3 years ago. Car accident." She turned to look at him. "I'm sorry." "Yeah." He exhaled. "I have a daughter, Ava. She's 9. She looks exactly like her mother, and every morning that's both wonderful and—" He stopped. "Devastating," Victoria offered softly. "I was going to say complicated, but yeah, devastating is more honest." Something shifted in her face, a small, quiet thing, like a door opening a crack. "What does that feel like?" she asked. "Having someone who needs you that completely." The question was genuine, raw even. Like she'd wanted to ask it for a long time and just needed someone who wouldn't turn it into content. Honestly. He thought about it. "It's the only thing that keeps me moving forward, and sometimes the thing that makes forward feel impossible." She nodded slowly. "I have no one who needs me," she said. "Not like that." Her voice was even careful. "Hundreds of employees, thousands of shareholders. My mother calls every Sunday to remind me that the company's reputation rests on my choices." She paused. "But no one who'd be devastated if I just stopped." He looked at her carefully. "I find that very hard to believe." "You don't know me." "No. But you're here alone on a terrace at your own event. That tells me more than your Forbes profile did." She looked at him sharply, and then slowly, something that was almost a real smile appeared. "You read my Forbes profile." "Marcus made me." He shrugged. "Standard briefing before a rich person event. She laughed. Genuine. Unguarded. And in that moment, the performance dropped entirely just for a second, and he saw the actual person underneath all of it. Tired. A little sad. Remarkably stubbornly human. The next 2 hours dissolved in a way that neither of them planned for. They stayed on that terrace far longer than was reasonable. They talked about Ava's obsession with marine biology and the model of a blue whale she'd built from paper towel tubes, about the first company Victoria had ever run at 22 that went under spectacularly, about grief and work, and the quiet cruelty of 2 a.m. when your mind won't stop moving. At some point, someone brought them both new drinks. At some point, the event inside wound down, and they barely noticed. "You should go back in," Ethan said eventually. "It's your event. It ended 40 minutes ago." He blinked, checked his watch. Past midnight. "I didn't realize." "Neither did I." She was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That hasn't happened to me in a long time." "What hasn't?" Losing track of time. He should have said goodnight then. Gotten his coat, called a cab, gone home, replayed the conversation in his mind for a week, and then gone back to his quiet life. He didn't. She said, "There's a hotel bar downstairs. It's usually empty by now." He looked at her for a moment. "I have a sitter until 1. It's 12:15. "So that's 45 minutes. 45 minutes, she agreed. 45 minutes became 2 hours. He never intended to stay. She hadn't planned to ask. But somewhere in the warm light of an empty hotel bar, with the city going quiet outside and the drinks coming easier than the conversation should have allowed, the careful distance between two lonely people collapsed, not violently, but slowly, the way a wall gives way not to force, but to water. He remembered laughing. Remembered her leaning forward on the bar, with both arms crossed, telling a story about a board meeting where she'd mispronounced a merger partner's name for an entire hour, and no one corrected her. Remembered thinking she was extraordinary, not because of the wealth or the headlines or the way the room had looked at her earlier, but because of the way she listened. Like what he was saying was the only thing in the room that mattered. He remembered the cab he didn't call, the elevator, the way she'd looked at him in the hallway, with an expression that said, "This is a line we're about to cross, and I know it, and I'm choosing it anyway." He'd said Victoria, and she'd said, "I know." He was gone by 5 a.m. He stood in the elevator on the way down, looking at himself in the mirrored doors, and didn't know what to make of what he felt. Not regret, that wasn't it. Something more complicated. The ache of having been fully seen by someone for the first time in 3 years, and the terror of what that meant. He got home, paid Denise, checked on Ava, who was asleep with a nature documentary still running on the tablet. He stood in her doorway for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to no one, or maybe to Claire, or maybe to himself. Then he turned off the tablet, went to bed, and told himself it was a single night. A moment of human weakness. Something that happened between two lonely people who would never see each other again. He was wrong. Victoria Sterling called him 3 days later. He almost didn't pick up, didn't recognize the number, almost let it go to voicemail. "It's Victoria," she said when he answered. Her voice was controlled, professional, the voice she used in boardrooms. "I know," he said. Silence. "I don't do this," she said. "I want you to know that. This is not something I do." "Neither do I." Another silence. Different this time. Uncertain in a way that felt more honest than the boardroom voice. "I'd like to see you again," she said. "If that's something you—" "Yes," he said. He hadn't planned the answer. It just came. He heard something that might have been relief in her exhale. "Okay," she said. What followed was a month of something neither of them had a clean name for. Secret meetings, coffee, in neighborhoods where neither of them was likely to be recognized. A Sunday at a museum, where Victoria stood in front of a marine biology exhibit and texted him photos of the whale displays because he'd mentioned Ava. Evenings where he cooked in his apartment, she sat at his kitchen counter with her blazer off and her shoes on the floor, and for a few hours the whole architecture of their separate lives fell away. She was different in private. The public Victoria Sterling was a monument. Controlled, precise, never off message. Private Victoria asked too many questions, laughed at her own jokes before she finished them. Had strong and specific opinions about movies she'd watched alone in hotel rooms, and fell asleep on his couch reading a report she'd brought because she swore she'd only stay an hour. He didn't wake her. He sat across the room in the quiet, watching the city lights through the window, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years shift carefully, painfully in his chest. He didn't know what to call it yet. He was afraid to. Chant. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday evening. Ava had been staying at Denise's for the week. Ethan had cooked. Victoria was late. She'd texted. Board ran over 45 more minutes. I'm so sorry. And by the time she arrived, she looked like someone had wrung her out. She came inside, sat at the kitchen counter, and put her face in her hands. He waited. My mother called during the board meeting, she said, not moving. She found out I missed the Halstead dinner, the one she arranged with Senator Halstead's son, the one she's been planning for 3 months. A pause. She told me I was destroying the family's future. For missing a dinner. For existing outside the version of myself she designed. She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry, but the effort it took was visible. She has a very specific idea of what I should be, who I should be with, what choices I'm allowed to make. She looked at him steadily. You understand that if anyone finds out about us, it creates serious problems. For you, for your job, for Ava. The mention of Ava landed like a weight. I know, he said. I need you to really know that. Not just the general idea of it, the specific reality. Victoria. He set down the dish towel, crossed the kitchen, stood across from her. I'm a grown man with a 9-year-old daughter and a mortgage and a job I'm genuinely mediocre at. I'm not naive about what complicated means. She looked at him for a long moment. Then why are you still here? He thought about it. Really thought about it, instead of reaching for the easy answer. Because, he said finally, I haven't felt like a whole person in 3 years, and when I'm with you, I do. He paused. That's terrifying, and probably dangerous, and I'm here anyway. She was very quiet. Then she said in a voice stripped of everything professional, I don't know how to do this, any of this, the normal parts, the being with someone. I'm going to mess it up. Yeah, he said honestly. Probably. Me too. Something loosened in her face. Okay, she said softly. He went back to the stove. She stayed at the counter. The city outside went dark around them. And neither of them said what both of them already felt, because saying it out loud would make it real, and real things could be taken away. 6 weeks later, he got the call. It was 11 p.m. He was grading papers at the kitchen table he'd taken on some adjunct work at the community college. Extra income. Nothing glamorous when his phone buzzed. Victoria. He picked up immediately. Hey, can you come over? Not a question. The way she said it flat stripped nothing left of the boardroom voice. What's wrong? Please. A pause. Please, just come. He was out the door in 4 minutes. She let him in herself, unusual. No staff, no assistant. The apartment dark except for the kitchen light. She was in jeans and a sweater barefoot, and that alone told him something was very wrong. Victoria Sterling did not do barefoot. She didn't look at him when he came in. He stood in the kitchen doorway and waited. Her hands were wrapped around a coffee mug. Her eyes were fixed on the counter. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then she set down the mug, very carefully, and looked up at him. Ethan, she said. Her voice was different from anything he'd heard from her before. Not the CEO, not the controlled public face, not even the unguarded woman from the terrace or his couch. This was something underneath all of that. Bare and frightened in a way that real fear sounds quiet, not loud. "I'm pregnant." The kitchen went completely still. He heard his own heartbeat, heard the refrigerator hum, heard distantly a car on the street 12 floors below. He looked at her. She was watching him with those sharp, tired eyes waiting for what he couldn't tell. Anger, denial. A man who ran. He did none of those things. He crossed the kitchen, pulled out the stool beside hers, and sat down. Reached over and put his hand over hers, still wrapped around the coffee mug. She looked down at his hand, then up at him. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." Her voice cracked just barely. "That's Ethan. This isn't, I know. This is not a simple situation. I am not a simple, Victoria." He waited until she was looking at him. "I know." She stared at him. Something moved in her face. Something he hadn't seen before, the edge of breaking carefully held back. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "You said that before." "This is different." "Yeah," he agreed quietly. "It is." She pulled her hand back, stood, walked to the window. He stayed where he was watching her. "My board will use this," she said back to him now. "My mother will use this. The media they'll destroy both of us. They'll find you. They'll find Ava." She pressed one hand against the glass. "I have thought about every possible version of what happens next, and every version is a disaster." "Not every version," he said. She turned. He looked at her steadily. "Not the version where we figure it out." Her throat moved. She looked at him for a long time, calculating, measuring the CEO side of her, running the numbers. Then something in her face changed. Quiet. Undeniable. She walked back across the kitchen, sat back down, put her hands flat on the counter. "I'm terrified," she said. "Me too," he said. "I've been terrified for 3 years." He paused. "You get used to it." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh, but was adjacent to one, and then she leaned her head just slightly, just barely against his shoulder. He didn't move. Outside, the city hummed on indifferent. And everything that was coming for them was already in motion: the board, the press, the money, the war. But in that kitchen, for one quiet moment, none of it had arrived yet. 3 days passed before either of them said anything beyond the immediate. Victoria went back to work the morning after she told him. Ethan knew because she sent a single text at 6:47 a.m. "I'm okay. Thank you for staying." And then nothing until evening. He didn't push. He understood the need to rebuild the walls before facing the day. He'd done the same thing for 3 years. He went to work. He taught his classes. He picked up Ava from school, listened to her explain at considerable length why the giant squid was more evolutionarily sophisticated than the great white shark, and made pasta for dinner. Normal things. Life continuing as it always did, indifferent to the earthquake that had just rearranged the ground underneath it. But that night, after Ava was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and didn't grade papers. He just sat and thought about the look on Victoria's face when she'd said, "I'm pregnant," that stripped bare fear, and the way she'd leaned her head against his shoulder afterward, so careful about it, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. He thought about Ava, about what this meant, about the 10,000 ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about Victoria, standing at that window, pressing her hand against the glass, cataloging every version of disaster. She'd missed one. The version where they didn't run. He picked up his phone. "You eat anything today?" 3 minutes passed, half a protein bar, and what I believe was coffee, but may have been motor oil. He almost smiled. "Come over tomorrow night. I'll cook." Another pause. Longer. "Ethan, we need to talk about what we're actually doing here." "I know. Come over and we'll talk." That's not Victoria. Come over. The longest pause yet. He watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice. 7 o'clock. He set the phone down, looked at the ceiling. Okay then, he thought. Okay. She arrived at 7 sharp. She was always exactly on time. He'd noticed, as if lateness was a form of dishonesty she refused to participate in. She had a bag over her shoulder, and the careful posture she wore in public, but the moment the door closed behind her, he watched her exhale something she'd been holding all day. "Ava's at Denise's," she asked. "Until 9. She nodded, set her bag down, followed him to the kitchen, and sat at the counter while he worked, and for a while, they were just quiet together. The particular quiet they'd developed over the past weeks, the kind that didn't demand anything. Then she said, "I took another test this morning." And, "Same answer." She said it evenly, but her fingers tightened around the water glass he'd set in front of her. "I have an appointment Thursday, with my private physician. Full confirmation, blood work, everything. Do you want me to come?" She looked at him quickly, startled, like the question was unexpected. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He turned from the stove. "Do you want me there?" She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her face, a complicated calculation, personal and private. "Yes," she said finally, quietly. "I think I do." He nodded and turned back to the stove because he understood she didn't need a reaction, just the answer. And he gave it to her without making it a moment, which was exactly what she needed. That was the first night she fell asleep on his couch, and he didn't wake her. He sat across the room and watched her, and thought carefully and seriously about what kind of man he was going to be in the next few months. Because a decision was coming, not the decision about the pregnancy that wasn't his to make, but the decision about whether he was going to stand beside this woman when the world started throwing things at them. And the world would throw things. He had no doubt about that. The question was whether he was the kind of man who stood anyway. He thought he was. He hoped he was. He'd been wrong about himself before. The doctor's appointment confirmed everything on Thursday morning. Ethan sat in a waiting room that was too expensive and too quiet, in a building where the receptionist recognized Victoria and said nothing. The particular professional blindness of people paid to be discreet. Victoria came out 40 minutes later. She sat down next to him without speaking. He waited. 8 weeks, she said. He did the math without wanting to. Their first night, the gala. "Okay," he said. "She gave me information about options." She said it carefully, neutrally, the way she discussed business decisions, presenting facts before conclusions. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Just that. No pressure in his voice, no lean in any direction. He'd meant it when he said the decision wasn't his to make. She turned to look at him. Really looked like she was testing whether he actually meant it or was performing patience. "I want to keep it," she said. Her chin came up slightly when she said it. Defensive, but certain. "Then that's what we do," he said. She stared at him. "Ethan, do you understand what—" "Yes. The board alone will." "Yes. My mother is going to Can Victoria." He met her eyes. "Yes, I understand. And that's still what we do." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned away, looked at the wall across the room. "I've never had anyone just agree," she said quietly. "Without negotiating. Without conditions." "I'm not negotiating." I noticed. A pause. "That's either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," he said. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, small and reluctant. "Probably," she agreed. They sat in that expensive, quiet waiting room for another few minutes, side by side, two people who'd just signed up for something enormous without reading all the fine print. And somehow that felt more honest than anything Ethan had done in years. The following 2 weeks were a careful performance of normal. Victoria managed it the way she managed everything, with precision and control. She showed up to board meetings, gave the right answers to the right people. returned her mother's Sunday calls with enough information to satisfy without revealing anything. She was, as always, impeccable. Ethan managed it the way he managed everything after Claire, by focusing on the immediate. Ava, work. The next meal, the next morning, the next hour. They saw each other when they could. Carefully. Quietly. A building across town from hers. A restaurant no camera crew would ever stake out Sundays in his apartment, when Ava was occupied, and the city moved past the windows, and the world was just the two of them, in the ordinary light. It was in those ordinary moments that Ethan started to understand something about Victoria Sterling that her entire public reputation had buried. She was not invulnerable. She was not cold. She was someone who had learned very early and very thoroughly that vulnerability was dangerous, that showing softness meant giving people something to use against you. She'd built the armor so well and worn it so long that most people assumed there was nothing underneath. There was everything underneath. He saw it in the way she asked about Ava, specific remembered questions, not polite small talk. Did she finish the whale model? What did her teacher say about the science fair project? He saw it in the way she laughed in his kitchen, genuinely and without managing it. He saw it the night she got off a 14-hour day and came over and didn't want to talk at all, just sat beside him on the couch with her head against his shoulder and watched whatever Ethan had on, half asleep, completely unguarded. He understood slowly, and with something like wonder, that he might be the only person in her life who saw this version of her. That thought made him feel something he wasn't ready to name. It also made him afraid in a way he recognized the specific terror of something starting to matter. The first crack in their careful normal came on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks after the doctor's appointment. Ethan picked Ava up from school. She was quiet in the car, that particular 9-year-old quiet, that meant something was being processed. He waited. "Jalen said his dad saw you at a restaurant," Ava said finally, "with a woman." His hands were steady on the wheel. Years of single parenthood had trained him to keep his face neutral. "Oh yeah. He said she was really dressed up." A pause. "He said she looked important." "His dad probably saw someone who looked like me." Ava turned to look at him with those Claire eyes, steady and patient, and seeing everything. "Dad?" He exhaled slowly. "It's not... Are you seeing someone?" He thought about lying. He was genuinely tempted. Not to protect himself, to protect her. From uncertainty, from the complication, from the possibility of caring about someone and losing them. He'd watched her grieve her mother. He'd watched her rebuild. He didn't want to hand her another variable, but she was 9 years old and she looked exactly like her mother, and her mother had never in her life respected a lie. "I've been spending some time with someone," he said carefully. "It's new. It's complicated, bug." She was quiet, the kind of quiet that was working something through. "Do you like her?" "Yes." "Is she nice?" He thought about Victoria falling asleep with a report on her chest. Victoria sending him photos of whale exhibits. Victoria sitting in a hospital waiting room with her hands folded in her lap, like she was holding herself together by will alone. "She's real," he said. "She's a real person. That's the best thing I can say." Ava turned back to the window. He waited. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. I'm not saying it's fine. I'm saying okay. There's a difference." He almost smiled. "Fair enough." She looked at him one more time, measuring precise. "Does she know about Mom?" "Yes." "Good," Ava said, and turned back to the window, and that was all. He called Victoria that night after Ava was asleep, told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. As much of it as I could." Another pause. "Are you going to tell her the rest of it?" "Not yet. She's 9. I need to know what the rest of it looks like first, before I ask her to carry any of it." Victoria didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was careful. "I think that's right. But Ethan, it won't stay contained. It can't. The longer we..." "I know. I'm not trying to rush you. I'm trying to... I know, Victoria, I know. He leaned his head back. I'm figuring it out. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I had dinner with my mother tonight. He sat up slightly. And she has a name. For the man she wants me to marry, Harrison Caldwell III. The way she said it was flat, almost clinical. 44. Old family money. Clean reputation. Very good for Sterling Global's board image. What did you say? Nothing. I let her talk. A pause. I'm 11 weeks pregnant with your child, and I sat across from my mother and said nothing. Victoria, don't. Her voice tightened. Don't reassure me. I'm not asking for reassurance. I'm telling you how it is, because you deserve to know what's coming. He was quiet. She's going to find out, Victoria said. Not from me, but she will. And when she does... She stopped. He could hear her breathing. Controlled. Careful. When she does, she will not accept it. She will act. That's who she is. She acts. What does acting look like? A long pause. Resources, Victoria said. My mother has very significant resources, and she is not above using them. He felt something cold move through him. Are you telling me she'd come after me? I'm telling you she'd come after anything she could reach. Another pause. Including your job. He absorbed that. Let it land fully without flinching. Okay, he said. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being the right answer. He waited a beat. We're not stopping, Victoria. Silence on her end. Long and waited. No, she said finally. We're not. 3 days later, the second crack appeared. Marcus pulled him aside after a department meeting, a hand on the arm, the look on his face that said, "This is not casual." Somebody's been asking about you, Marcus said quietly. Ethan went still. Who? I don't know exactly, but HR got a call. Someone doing what they called a background verification. Employment history, conduct record, financial status. Marcus looked at him steadily. Ethan, what's going on? He held Marcus's gaze for a moment. How specific was it? Specific enough that it wasn't random. He thought of Victoria's mother. Resources. The word came back with weight now. I can't explain everything right now, Ethan said quietly. But I need you to know whatever they're looking for, they won't find it. I've done nothing wrong. I know that. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Is this about the woman from the gala? Ethan said nothing. God, Ethan. Marcus pressed a hand to the back of his neck. Do you know who she is? Not just the headlines. Do you know what her family is? I know exactly who she is. Then you know what they do to people who... Marcus. His voice was quiet, but final. I know. Marcus stared at him. Something resigned moved across his face. You're in love with her. Ethan didn't answer, which was its own answer. Okay, Marcus said, heavily. Okay, what do you need from me? Just if anything else comes through HR, let me know before it goes further. Done. A pause. You're going to tell me everything eventually. Eventually. He called Victoria as soon as he was out of the building. She picked up on the second ring. Your mother's already moving, he said. A beat. Tell me. He told her. She listened without interrupting the CEO mode, taking in information and processing it in real time. When he finished, she said, I'll handle it. Victoria. Ethan. I will handle it. Her voice was iron. She is my mother. This is my company. And you are... She stopped. Something shifted in her voice, softer underneath. You are not something I'm willing to let her reach. He was quiet for a moment. You can't fight her and run a company and manage a pregnancy all at the same time, he said. Watch me. He wanted to push back. He could tell it wouldn't land. So instead he said, Let me help. Tell me what you need. Another one of her long silences. He was learning to read them. This one was her deciding how much to let him in. "Come over tonight," she said finally. "We need to talk through it together." "I'll be there at 8. He was there at 7:50. She had papers spread across the kitchen counter, company bylaws, board documents, something that looked like a legal brief. She looked up when he came in, and for just a moment, before the CEO face reassembled, he saw how tired she actually was. The particular exhaustion of someone fighting on every front simultaneously. "Sit down," she said. "I want to walk you through what she can and can't do, Victoria." He didn't sit. He crossed the kitchen, gently moved 2 stacks of paper aside, and took both her hands in his. She looked at him sharply, surprised by the interruption, maybe by the gesture. "The papers can wait 60 seconds. She stared at him. "How are you?" he asked. Not performatively, genuinely. She blinked. The question seemed to catch her entirely off guard, like it was not a question she'd been asked that day or that week, or possibly in longer than she could immediately remember. Her hands tightened around his, just slightly. "I'm scared," she said. Simply. No armor at all. "I know." He held her hands a moment longer. Then, "Now show me the papers." She almost smiled. "You're impossible." "Yeah, show me the papers." They worked at her kitchen counter until nearly midnight. Ethan asking questions, Victoria explaining board structure and legal exposure, and the very specific, very calculated ways her mother could apply pressure without leaving fingerprints. He wasn't a lawyer, and he didn't pretend to be. But he asked the right questions. And more than that, he was there. Present, solid, focused, and she needed that more than any legal analysis he could have offered. At 11:40, she set down her pen and looked at him. "She's going to offer you money," Victoria said. He looked up. "What?" "My mother. When she confirms who you are, and what this is, she will find you, privately, and she will offer you money to walk away." She held his gaze. "It won't be a small amount." He held her gaze back. "And you're telling me this because I want you to know before it happens, not after." She lifted her chin slightly. "And because I want you to know that I know it will happen. And I'm asking you." She stopped, looked down at the papers, back at him. "I'm asking you anyway." He understood what she was asking. Not just to stay to choose, knowing the cost before the cost arrived. "Victoria," he said. "You don't have to be Victoria." He waited until she was looking at him. "There's no amount." She stared at him. Her throat moved. He went back to the papers, and she sat beside him, and they worked through the rest of it together. And outside the city went dark and quiet, and the war that was coming for them was getting closer by the hour. They both knew it. Neither of them said it again. There was nothing left to say. There was only what they were going to do, and they were going to do it together. That much at least had been decided. The leak happened on a Thursday. Ethan found out the way everyone else did his phone. A news alert at 6:22 in the morning while he was still in the kitchen making Ava's lunch. The screen lit up on the counter, and he glanced at it without thinking, and then stood completely still with a half-made sandwich in his hand, and read the headline 3 times before it became real. Sterling CEO's secret affair exposed, billionaire pregnant by unknown man sources. Say. He put down the knife, picked up the phone, opened the article. There was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, clearly a long lens, the two of them outside his building 3 weeks ago, a Sunday evening. Victoria's hand was on his arm. They were looking at each other. In the context of the article, the image said everything the headline needed it to say. He called her before he finished reading. She picked up on the first ring. "I know." Her voice was the iron voice. The CEO voice. But underneath it, something was pulled very tight. "How bad?" he asked. "It's going to get worse before it gets better." A pause. "My PR team is already working on containment. It won't contain." "How did they get the photo?" "I don't know yet." Another pause, shorter. "Ethan, they're going to find your address. If they haven't already, they will by this afternoon. You need to think about Ava. His stomach dropped. Ava. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know this is... Don't. He was already moving through the apartment thinking, don't apologize right now. Just tell me what I need to do. Call your sister. Or Denise. Get Ava out of the apartment before school. Don't use the front entrance. A beat. And Ethan, don't talk to anyone. Not a single word. Whatever they ask, whatever they say about you, nothing. Not yet. Okay? I mean it. They will twist anything you say. They are very good at this. Victoria. He stopped moving. I know. I'm okay. Are you okay? The briefest pause. Long enough to tell him the answer was no. I will be, she said. Go take care of Ava. He was out the door in 11 minutes. He called Denise from the cab, kept his voice low and even, while Ava sat beside him asking questions with her eyes that he wasn't ready to answer. Denise, bless her, asked nothing except what time. And I'll have the coffee on. He dropped Ava off, kissed her forehead, told her he'd explain everything tonight, and watched the doubt move across her face, the 9-year-old version of, I know something is wrong, and I'm deciding whether to push on it. She didn't push. She just said, Be careful, Dad, and went inside. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathed. Then he turned around and walked into the rest of it. By 9 a.m., there were 2 vans outside his building. He watched them from the coffee shop across the street, cameras, a reporter he vaguely recognized from the local news. A woman with a microphone who was already doing a piece to camera with his building in the background. His building. His address. Where Ava slept and did her homework and built paper whale models on the kitchen floor. His phone had 47 missed calls. He knew 11 of the numbers. He didn't know the rest. Marcus texted, Call me when you can. This is bad, but we'll figure it out. His department head texted Ethan, I need to speak with you before you come in today. Please call my office. He stared at that one for a long time. Then his phone rang. Number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go. Something made him answer. Mr. Brooks. The voice was a woman's. Measured, controlled, the particular tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. My name is Margaret Sterling. I believe we should meet. He was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Mrs. Sterling, he said, I'll keep this brief. I'd like to have a conversation, private, civil, and productive. There's a car outside your building, or what I believe is your building. A pause. I suggest you use the side entrance. He looked across the street at the news vans. Where? He asked. Somewhere quiet. I'm not an unreasonable woman, Mr. Brooks. I simply want to talk. She said it the way powerful people always said it. I'm not unreasonable, right before they did something unreasonable. 1 hour, he said. Text me the address. He called Victoria the moment he hung up. She answered in one ring again. Your mother just called me, he said, a sharp breath on her end. She called you directly. She wants to meet. Ethan, do not. I'm going. Ethan, listen to me. She's going to do what she's going to do whether I meet her or not. I'd rather look her in the face when she does it. He paused. I can handle it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, the iron was still there, but something underneath it was frightened and trying not to be. She is not going to be kind to you. I don't need her to be kind. She's going to offer you money. I know. A lot of money. I know. Ethan? Her voice dropped. Whatever she offers, whatever she says, please remember that she does not know you. She knows a file. She knows a photograph. She doesn't know who you actually are. He let that land. Let it matter the way it was meant to. I'll be fine, he said. How are you holding up? The board has called an emergency session for tomorrow morning. The bottom dropped out of his stomach. Tomorrow. 12 hours after the story breaks. Efficient, aren't they? Her voice was dry, but he heard what was underneath it. I'm preparing. I'll be prepared. Victoria, go meet my mother. A pause. And Ethan, do not let her see you flinch. Not once. He said, I never do. Margaret Sterling was already seated when he arrived a private room in a hotel restaurant, no staff visible, just a table with water and coffee, and a woman who looked like Victoria in 25 years, if Victoria had replaced every ounce of warmth with calculation. Elegant, composed. The kind of woman who had been controlling rooms since before Ethan was born. She looked at him when he sat down. A long, frank assessment. He let her do it. "You're younger than I expected," she said finally. "You're exactly what I expected," he said. Something moved in her face, not quite surprise, more like a recalibration. "I appreciate directness," she said. "Then I'll be direct. My daughter has worked for 12 years to build Sterling Global into what it is. She has sacrificed personally, emotionally, extensively to maintain the reputation that keeps that company viable." She set down her coffee cup precisely. "You are a complication she doesn't need and a liability the company cannot afford." "I'm the father of her child," Ethan said. "Yes, that's the problem." He looked at her steadily. "With respect, Mrs. Sterling, that's not a problem. That's a fact. Facts can be managed." She reached into the bag beside her chair and placed an envelope on the table between them. White. Thick. $15 million, Mr. Brooks. A trust account in your name transferable within 48 hours. You sign a standard confidentiality agreement. You relocate outside the state. You have no further contact with my daughter or the child. She pushed the envelope a quarter-inch toward him. You and your daughter would be financially secure for life. That is not an insult. That is a solution. He looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. Then he looked up at her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She waited. "Does she know you're doing this?" "Not in general. Does she know the specific number, the specific terms?" A very small pause. "This is a family matter." "Right." He leaned back in his chair. "Meaning no, she doesn't know." He nodded slowly. "I'm going to tell you something, Mrs. Sterling, and I'd like you to actually hear it. Not manage it. Hear it." She said nothing which he took as permission. "Your daughter is one of the most capable, most exhausted, loneliest people I have ever met. And she has been all of those things, I'd guess, for a very long time. I don't know exactly how much of that is on you. But I know that the version of Victoria you've built, the controlled, perfect, untouchable CEO, that's not all of her. And that's not the version of herself she wants to be forever." He paused. "She wants this child. She wants a life that's actually hers. And no amount of money is going to make me the thing that stops that from happening." The room was very quiet. Margaret Sterling looked at him for a long, measured moment. Her expression didn't break. It was like watching someone run a calculation in real time. "You think you love her," she said finally. "I know I do." "You've known her for 2 months." "Long enough. Mr. Brooks." She leaned forward slightly. "I have seen men like you before. Men who believe that love is sufficient. That feeling is enough. They are always, without exception, unprepared for what comes with a woman like my daughter." She paused. "The board, the media, the shareholders who will question her judgment for being with someone like you. The years of your daughter growing up in the shadow of a family that will never fully accept her. The price of this is not $15 million. It is a lifetime. And I am trying to save you from it." He was quiet for a moment. "I've already lost everything once," he said. "My wife. The life I planned. I watched my daughter lose her mother at 6 years old. I know exactly what the worst looks like." He met Margaret Sterling's eyes without blinking. "So when you tell me about the price of this, I need you to understand I have already paid prices that would break most people. This doesn't scare me." Something shifted in the older woman's face. The calculation ran. Recalibrated again. She picked up the envelope, placed it back in her bag. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Maybe." He stood up. "But it's mine to make." He walked out without looking back. He was in a cab 3 minutes later when his phone rang. Not Victoria. Marcus. "Ethan?" Marcus's voice was tight. "You need to come in. Not to your office. HR, they want to see you today. Everything in him went quiet. Why? An anonymous complaint was filed this morning about conduct, about their saying you used the company's corporate account to access private information about Sterling Global before the relationship became public. Someone is claiming you used the relationship for insider access. The accusation hit him like ice water. That's not true. I know that. Marcus, that is never... I know, Ethan. I believe you. But they're moving on it. A pause. They've suspended your access pending investigation. I'm sorry. I found out 20 minutes ago. He closed his eyes. Opened them. Outside, the city moved past the cab window indifferent. Okay, he said. The word was becoming a reflex. A way of not going under. It's her mother, Marcus said quietly. Has to be. The timing. Yeah. He exhaled. Yeah, I know. He texted Victoria from the cab. Just the facts. Short and clear. Her response came back in under a minute. I know. My lawyer is already pulling the complaint records. This is fabricated, Ethan. We will prove that. Do not go into that HR meeting without representation. He stared at the message. Something tightened in his chest. Not fear exactly. The particular feeling of understanding that a war had actually started, and there was no version of backing down that ended well. He typed back, I'm not backing down. 3 dots appeared. Then I know. Neither am I. The HR meeting happened at 2 p.m. He brought the union rep, not a lawyer. It was too fast to arrange a lawyer, but Marcus had called in a favor and gotten someone with enough institutional knowledge to sit across the table and make sure the meeting was recorded. Ethan answered every question evenly, denied every accusation directly, and signed nothing. The investigator, a woman who was clearly uncomfortable with the whole proceeding, told him the investigation would take 5 to 10 business days, and he was on paid administrative leave in the interim. He walked out of the building he'd worked in for 4 years with his building pass in a manila envelope, and Marcus walking beside him, and felt the ground shifting in a way he recognized. The particular instability of everything changing at once. You okay? Marcus asked. No, Ethan said honestly. But I'm upright. That counts. Yeah. He stopped on the sidewalk, looked up. The afternoon was bright and ordinary, the way it always was when something devastating was happening, like the sky refused to editorialize. I need to get to Ava. Go, I'll keep you posted from inside. He got to Denise's by 4. Ava was at the kitchen table doing homework, and the moment he walked in, she looked up and he saw it in her face. She'd seen something. Or someone had said something at school. The particular look of a child who has discovered that the world knows something about her family before she did. He sat down across from her. Denise quietly moved to the other room. Okay, he said. Ask me. Is she famous? Ava said. Straightforward. No preamble. Yes. Like really famous? Yes. Ava looked at her homework, then at him. Kids at school were showing each other stuff on their phones. A pause. About you. And her. He felt something grind in his chest. What did you do? I said I didn't know what they were talking about. She looked at him carefully. Which wasn't true. No, he agreed. It wasn't. Dad. She pushed her homework aside. All 9 years of her, all that patience, all that precision. What's actually going on? So he told her. Not everything. Not the pregnancy, not the board, not the money or the accusations or the HR meeting or Margaret Sterling in a private dining room with a white envelope. But the shape of it. The true shape. That he had been seeing someone. That she was someone the news cared about. That it had become public in a way neither of them wanted. That it was complicated and uncomfortable, and that people at school might say things, and he was sorry about that. He was genuinely, deeply sorry about that. Ava listened, all the way through. Didn't interrupt once. When he finished, she said, Do you love her? He had not expected that question. Not from a 9-year-old, not with that directness, not tonight. He thought about lying. He thought about, it's complicated. Or I care about her very much. He thought about every soft, safe, carefully managed answer a parent reaches for to protect a child from the full weight of adult truth. Then he thought about Ava at 6 years old, standing at Claire's funeral. Not crying, just holding his hand with a grip that said, I know this is real, and I'm not looking away. Yes, he said. I think I do. Ava looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her face that was too old for 9, and too young for whatever it was trying to be. Is she good? Ava asked, quiet, serious. What do you mean? Is she a good person? Like actually? He thought of Victoria on a couch falling asleep with a report on her chest. Victoria texting him photos of whale exhibits. Victoria in a hospital waiting room with her hands folded, holding herself together. Victoria looking at him across a kitchen at midnight and saying, I'm scared, in the only bare, honest voice she had. Yes, he said. She is. Ava nodded, slowly, like she was filing it away. Okay, she said. Okay. Okay means I heard you. It doesn't mean I'm fine with everything. She looked at him steadily. I'm not fine with everything. That's fair. But okay. She picked up her pencil, pulled her homework back. I'm going to finish my math. He sat there for a moment, just watching her, this extraordinary, impossible child, who was so much her mother's daughter that it physically ached sometimes and felt something he didn't have language for. Gratitude, maybe, and love so big it had no edges. I love you, Bug, he said. I love you too, Dad. A pause. Your situation is a mess. Yeah, he said. It really is. The news cycle exploded fully by the next morning. Not just the relationship, someone somewhere had confirmed the pregnancy. He didn't know how. He didn't know who. But by 7 a.m., it was on every major outlet, and by 8 a.m., Victoria's board had moved the emergency session up by 2 hours, and the commentary online had reached a volume and a viciousness that made him put his phone face down on the table and leave it there. He didn't need to read it. He knew what they were saying. He'd seen the shape of it in Margaret Sterling's face, A Man Like You, and he knew exactly what that meant and what it was meant to do. He didn't touch the phone. He made breakfast. He got Ava ready for school. He hugged her longer than usual at the door, and she let him, which meant she understood that he needed it. Then he sat alone in the apartment and waited. Victoria called at 9:47 a.m. Her voice was different, stripped in a new way, not fear, something harder. The board session starts in 13 minutes, she said. Are you ready? I've been ready for this for 12 years. A pause. There's something I want you to know before I go in. Tell me. A moment of silence, the kind that meant she was choosing words very carefully. Whatever happens in there, she said slowly. Whatever they do, whatever they try to take, I don't regret any of it. I want you to know that. I need you to know that. He felt something open in his chest, wide and painful and absolutely certain. Victoria, he said, don't. Her voice caught just slightly. If you say something, I'm going to lose my composure, and I cannot lose my composure in 7 minutes. Okay. He waited a beat. Go win. A sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. I intend to, she said. The line went quiet. He put the phone down on the table, looked at his hands. The apartment was silent around him, the same silence it had always been, the specific quiet of a life built for survival, for one day at a time, for keeping a daughter fed and safe and loved. But something was different now. The silence felt different. It felt like the held breath before something broke open, before the before became the after, and there was no going back to what either of them used to be. He sat in that silence and waited. And while he waited, he thought about a terrace, and a woman with a champagne glass she'd never touched, looking out at the city like she was calculating the distance to something she couldn't quite reach. He thought about 4 words in a kitchen at midnight. He thought about Ava saying, "Is she good like actually?" And the answer coming out of him without any effort at all. He thought about $15 million on a table, and the fact that he hadn't even picked up the envelope. Outside, the city moved. The board convened. The cameras waited, and Ethan Brooks sat alone in a quiet apartment and understood with the complete, unambiguous clarity that only arrives when everything is already in motion that he was not going anywhere. Whatever came next, he was staying. That was the only decision that had ever mattered, and it had already been made. The board session lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. Ethan knew this because he watched the clock on his kitchen wall move through every one of those minutes without being able to do a single useful thing. He made coffee he didn't drink. He called Marcus and got voicemail. He did 2 loads of laundry because movement was better than stillness, and folding clothes was the only task that required exactly enough concentration to keep him from going completely out of his mind. At 2:23 p.m., his phone lit up. Not Victoria. Her attorney, a woman named Sandra Okafor, whose name Ethan had learned 2 days ago and was already grateful for. The text was short. Session concluded. Victoria is fine. Call her in 20 minutes. She's with counsel now. He read it 3 times. Fine. The word was doing a lot of work. He didn't know if fine meant she'd won, or fine meant she was alive and standing, and that was the best available description. He waited the 20 minutes. 17, actually. He wasn't perfect. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was flat in the particular way of someone who had been performing strength for 4 hours and had just used the last of it getting through the door. They voted, she said. And 7-5. In my favor. A pause that lasted 2 full seconds. I'm still CEO. The air went out of him all at once. Victoria, don't celebrate yet. Her voice sharpened slightly. 7-5 is not a mandate, it's a warning. 3 of those 7 voted with me out of legal liability concerns, not loyalty. If anything else breaks anything, those 3 flip, and we do this again. She stopped. I bought time, that's all. Time is something, he said. Time is everything and nothing. He heard her move the sound of heels on marble, a door closing. Suddenly her voice dropped the professional edge entirely. Ethan, they said things in that room, about you, about us, about what I am and what I've done and what kind of woman makes the choices I've made. A pause. I want you to know that I answered every single one of them. What did you say? I said that my personal life is mine, that the father of my child is a man of integrity who has been subjected to a fabricated investigation that my own legal team is currently dismantling, and that any board member who wants to continue conflating my private decisions with my professional performance is welcome to take that argument to the shareholders directly. Another pause. There was a silence after that. I bet there was. 3 of them looked at their shoes. Something that was almost satisfaction moved through her voice, and then it faded. But Ethan, the vote was supposed to be 10-2. I lost 3 votes I thought I had, people I've worked with for 8 years. She went quiet. That's the part I keep coming back to. He understood. It wasn't the result, it was the names. The specific people who'd decided she was expendable when it became costly to support her. Who flipped? He asked. Donovan, Reyes, and Marsh. Each name landed like a small, distinct weight. Donovan called me a liability, to my face, in the room. She said it evenly, but he heard what was underneath the particular wound of betrayal from someone you'd trusted. Donovan's been on that board for 6 years, Ethan asked. 8. And he called you a liability. He said, and I'm quoting, that my judgment had become questionable and that the company required leadership that prioritized institutional stability over personal impulse. Her voice was very controlled. That was the word he chose, impulse. Ethan said nothing for a moment. Then, he'll regret that. Yes, she said simply. He will. A pause. Sandra is already pulling Donovan's conduct file. It turns out that a man who is very concerned about institutional stability has a fairly significant paper trail of his own that's been quietly managed for years. Her voice was cold and clean. People who live in glass houses, Mr. Donovan. There she is, Ethan said quietly. A beat. What? The woman who isn't going to lose this. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, the coldness had softened into something more tired and more real. I'm very close to the edge of what I can hold together today, she said. I want you to know that. I'm okay, but I'm close. I know. He paused. Ava's at school until 3. Come here. I have 4 calls this afternoon and a statement to approve, and Victoria. Silence. 2 hours, he said. The calls can wait 2 hours. Come here. The longest pause yet. I'll be there at 3, she said. She arrived at 3:14, and the moment he opened the door, he saw it. The way the board meeting posture was still on her, like a coat she hadn't figured out how to take off. He stepped back to let her in, and she walked past him into the kitchen and stood at the counter with both hands flat on the surface, head slightly bowed like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had just found a place to set it down. He didn't say anything. He put the kettle on. She stood there for a while. Then, without lifting her head, I'm 20 weeks pregnant, and I just sat in a boardroom for 4 hours defending my right to be a human being. I know. I am so tired, Ethan. I know. She lifted her head, looked at him. The CEO face was completely gone, just Victoria, just the actual exhausted real person underneath all of it. Tell me something that has nothing to do with any of this. He thought for a moment. Ava decided this morning that she wants to be a marine biologist who also does stand-up comedy. Something broke open in Victoria's face. A real smile startled out of her involuntary, the best kind. That's very specific, she said. She has a 5-minute bit about the social dynamics of dolphins. It's actually pretty good. Victoria made a sound, a real laugh, short and sudden, like she'd surprised herself. And then she put her face in her hands and made another sound that was adjacent to a laugh, but wasn't quite. And he understood she was very close to crying, and holding it off through sheer force of personality. He crossed the kitchen, put a hand on her back. Just that. She leaned into it. Barely. Just enough. I don't cry, she said, muffled behind her hands. I know. I genuinely don't. It's been years. That's fine. I'm not going to start today. Okay. A long pause. I might be close, though. That's also fine. She lowered her hands, looked at the counter. Her eyes were bright and dry and fighting to stay that way. My mother called me this morning before the session, she said quietly. She said she told me that this was my last chance to correct course, that if I went into that room and defended you, I was on my own. He went still. And you went in anyway. Yes. Victoria, she means it, she said. It wasn't self-pity, it was information. She will cut contact. She's done it before with my cousin over something far smaller. My mother does not make threats she doesn't follow through on. She paused. I want you to understand what I walked into that room knowing. He turned her gently so she was facing him. She looked at him, those sharp, tired eyes completely open in a way they almost never were. I want you to understand what that means to me, he said quietly. What you did. Don't make it into something bigger than Victoria. He waited. Thank you. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Just once, small and private. The kettle clicked off. He turned and made the tea, and she sat down at the counter, and for a little while the world outside stopped demanding things from both of them. It lasted 40 minutes. Then Ava came home. She came through the door the way she always did. Backpack first. A running commentary already in progress about something that had happened at school mid-sentence before the door was fully open. Then she stopped. Saw Victoria sitting at the kitchen counter. The commentary stopped. The three of them looked at each other. Ava's face was doing the calculation, all that 9-year-old precision running fast. Ethan watched her process it. This was the first time. The actual first time in person in their space, the woman from the news, and from her father's careful explanations, sitting at their kitchen counter, drinking tea. Victoria didn't stand up, didn't extend a hand, didn't perform the greeting. She just looked at Ava with an expression that was honest and slightly uncertain, which was the right instinct because Ava could smell performance from across a room and it ended conversations instantly. "Hi," Victoria said, quietly. No title, no formality. Ava looked at her for a long moment. "You look tired," she said. Ethan opened his mouth. Victoria held up one hand slightly. "I've got it," without taking her eyes off Ava. "I am," she said. "I had a very hard day." Ava considered that. "My dad makes tea when he has a hard day. He made me some." Ava looked at the mug, then at her father, then back at Victoria. "Did it help?" "A little," Victoria said. "The company helped more." Another long Ava pause. "He's good at that," she said finally. "The company part." "I noticed," Victoria said. Something moved in Ava's face, the computation finishing. Not resolution, not acceptance, not yet that would take longer, and Ethan knew it. But something. A door left slightly open. "I have homework," Ava said, to neither of them specifically. She walked past the counter, paused, and then, almost as an afterthought, said to Victoria, "My dad said you're actually a good person." Victoria looked at her carefully. "He said that?" "Yeah." Ava's eyes flicked to her father and back. "I'm still deciding." She walked to her room. The door didn't slam. That was important. Victoria looked at Ethan. Her eyes were very bright. "She's remarkable," she said softly. "She's terrifying," he said, "in the best possible way. She looks like her mother." "Exactly." He paused. "Every single day." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Her hand moved just slightly to rest on her own stomach. The gesture was unconscious. He noticed it and said nothing because some moments don't need language. 3 days later, Sandra Okafor called Ethan directly. He was at Marcus's kitchen table. He'd been staying there since a photographer had camped outside his building for 36 hours. And leaving felt less like retreat and more like basic sense. Marcus had said obviously when Ethan asked and moved Ethan's stuff into the guest room, without discussion, which was why Marcus had been his closest friend for 15 years. "The insider trading complaint has been withdrawn," Sandra said. "Officially. The anonymous complainant declined to provide documentation when we issued the subpoena." A pause. Interestingly, the IP address of the original submission traces to a device registered to a personal assistant employed by Margaret Sterling. Ethan sat back. "So, it was her. Officially, we can't prove that. Unofficially," Sandra left the word there. "Your employer has been notified. You'll be reinstated Monday. Full back pay, no record." "And Margaret Sterling. That," Sandra said carefully, "is a conversation for Victoria." He called Victoria within the minute. She was in a car. He could tell by the background acoustics and the slight delay that meant she had someone else present. "Sandra called you," she said. Not a question. "Yeah, good." A pause. "My mother made a mistake. She went after your job, which created a legal paper trail." Her voice was precise and quiet. "She is not accustomed to making mistakes." "What does this mean for you? For the two of you?" A careful silence. "She called me this morning, before I heard from Sandra." Another pause longer. "She wanted to discuss terms." "Terms. She is willing to acknowledge the situation, provisionally, in exchange for certain assurances about how the relationship is managed publicly and what role she has in decisions regarding the child." Victoria's voice was completely level. "She is trying to negotiate a position in a situation she has lost control of." "What did you say?" I told her that the child is not a boardroom asset and that I don't negotiate with people who fabricate criminal complaints against my family. A pause. And then I told her that if she would like a relationship with her grandchild, she will need to start by apologizing to you, directly, in person. Ethan stared at the wall across from him. Victoria, she won't do it immediately. That's not who she is, but she will do it. A certainty in her voice that was quiet and absolute. Because I know my mother, and underneath everything she's done, she does not want to lose access to this family. She just needed to understand that the terms are no longer hers to set. He absorbed that. Let it settle. You doing okay? He asked. I'm in a car on the way to a shareholder briefing, where I will spend 90 minutes reassuring people that I am still capable of running a company while 20 weeks pregnant. A dry, tired pause. I'm outstanding. He almost smiled. You are actually. A beat. Something softened in her voice just slightly. Don't be charming right now. I'm trying to stay sharp. Go be sharp, he said. Call me after. I will. A pause. Ethan, the shareholder meeting. Some of what comes out today might be they're going to ask about the personal situation. My team has prepared a statement, but there will be press after. It could be another wave. I know. I wanted to warn you. Victoria. He kept his voice steady. I am at Marcus's kitchen table, eating leftover pizza, and waiting for you to call me after your meeting. I'm not going anywhere. A silence. Warm somehow. Leftover pizza, she said. Cold. From 2 days ago. That is objectively terrible. It's outstanding, he said. Call me after. She did. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, just after 6. Her voice was a different kind of tired, not the depleted kind, the kind that comes after you've given everything and the thing held. It went well, she said. Better than expected. The lead shareholder Hendricks, the one who's been on the board since the company's founding, he spoke before I did. He talked about his own wife who ran a company in the 90s. He talked about what she faced, and then he said, she stopped. He could hear her breath. He said that a woman who runs this company while navigating what Victoria Sterling has navigated in the last 2 weeks demonstrates exactly the character he wants leading this organization. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Hendricks, he said. Yes. The one you were worried about. The one I was most worried about. A pause. He came up to me afterward. He shook my hand. He said, she stopped again. When she continued, her voice was careful, controlled, holding something in. He said, congratulations. About the baby. The word landed softly, completely differently from every other time either of them had said it. Victoria, Ethan said. I'm fine. Her voice was bright in the way that meant she was managing something. I'm completely fine. I'm in a car. I know. I'm not going to. I know. A silence. Long and real. Ethan. Her voice was quiet. No armor, no precision, just the actual person. I want to see you tonight. Come to Marcus's. A small sound. I am not having this moment at Marcus's house. He laughed. A real one. Fair. Come to your place. I'll get food. Something that isn't 2-day-old pizza. I'll make something. You don't have to. Victoria, I want to. A pause. Let me. Silence. Then 7:30. 7:30. He was there at 7:15 with groceries, and the particular focused energy of a man who'd spent 3 days waiting to do something useful. She arrived at 7:30 exactly, and when she walked in, she looked like someone had very slowly removed a weight from her shoulders over the course of an afternoon. Not light, not unburdened, but fractionally more like herself. He cooked. She sat at the counter and talked about the meeting, about Hendricks, about a junior analyst on her team who had sent her a private email that morning saying, "We're behind you," and signed it with 12 other names. Small things. Human things. The specific texture of a day that had been terrible And then in the last 2 hours, quietly, unexpectedly, not. After dinner, she said, "I want to ask you something." He looked at her across the counter. "Ava," she said carefully, "I know it's too early. I know there's no roadmap for this. But I want to know what you think about how we do this with her." She met his eyes. "Because she matters. Not as a complication. She matters." He looked at her for a long moment. "She's going to need time," he said honestly. "She's 9 and she's smart and she loved her mother completely. And she doesn't give her trust easily. You can't win her over. You can't perform your way in. The only thing that works with Ava is being real and being consistent and being there." "I can do that," Victoria said. "I know you can." "How do you know?" He thought about it. "Because you're the same way," he said. "You don't trust easily either. And the things you do trust, you commit to completely." He paused. "She's more like you than you'd expect." Victoria looked at him. Something moved across her face, complicated and deep, and not quite identifiable. "I don't want to replace her mother," she said quietly. "I want you to know that. I would never." "I know," he said. "And when the time is right, I'll make sure Ava knows it too." She nodded, looked down at her hands. He watched her sit with that for a moment, processing it the way she processed everything thoroughly and privately. Then she looked up. "The press conference," she said. "Sandra and my PR team want me to make a formal public statement. Not reactive, proactive. On our terms." She held his gaze. "I want to do it. I'm done managing this from a defensive position." His chest tightened slightly. "What would you say?" "The truth. Simple. Certain. I'm done letting other people define what this is, what we are." She paused. "But I won't do it without talking to you first. This involves you. It involves Ava. I need you to say yes." He looked at her. At the woman who had walked into a boardroom knowing her mother had withdrawn and still not flinched. At the woman who had sat across from Ava with no script and no performance and said, "I had a hard day," and meant it. At the woman who was 20 weeks pregnant and running a billion-dollar company and fighting on 6 fronts simultaneously, and still asking his permission before making a move that affected his family. "Yes," he said. "You haven't heard everything I'm planning to say." "It doesn't matter." He held her gaze. "Yes." She looked at him. The fullness of it, whatever she felt, whatever it was, moved through her face and settled somewhere quiet and permanent. "The day after tomorrow," she said. "The Meridian. Full press pool." He thought of the photograph, the grainy image from outside his building that had started all of it. He thought of Ava at Denise's table doing homework. He thought of a parking garage and a white envelope and $15 million he'd let fall to the floor. "I'll be there," he said. "You don't have to stand at the podium. You don't have to—" "Victoria." He waited until she was looking at him. "I'll be there." She stared at him. Her jaw tightened the way it did when she was holding something in that wanted out. "Okay," she said, barely above a whisper. "Okay," he said back. And somewhere in that apartment, in the specific quiet that existed only between the two of them, something that had been uncertain became certain. Something that had been defended became chosen, not by accident, not by circumstance, not by the gravity of two lonely people colliding in the dark, by choice. Clear and deliberate and fully awake. The war wasn't over. The press was still watching. The board was still fractured. Margaret Sterling was somewhere recalculating. The world was still going to have opinions about who they were and what they deserved, and whether this was real or foolish, or both. None of that had gone away. But in that kitchen at that counter, the two of them had made a decision that was stronger than any of it. They were going to walk into that room together, and they were going to tell the truth. The morning of the press conference, Ethan woke up at 5:14 and couldn't go back to sleep. He lay in the dark at Marcus's place and stared at the ceiling and did the thing he always did when something enormous was coming. He went through it. Not the speeches, not the logistics, not what Victoria was going to say or how the cameras were going to react. He went through the people. Ava. Victoria. The child that didn't have a name yet. The version of his life that existed before a charity gala and a terrace, and a woman with an untouched champagne glass. The version that was coming after. He'd been a man who survived. For 3 years, that had been enough survive. The grief survive, the bills survive, the particular loneliness of raising a child alone and loving every second of it, and missing another adult in the room with a sharpness that never quite went away. Surviving was not nothing. He'd been good at it, but somewhere between a kitchen at midnight and a hospital waiting room and a parking garage and a 9-year-old girl saying, "I'm still deciding," somewhere in all of that surviving had quietly become something else. And he was only now in the dark at 5:14 in the morning, fully admitting what that something else was. He picked up his phone, texted Victoria. "You awake?" The response came in 40 seconds. She'd been awake for a while. Since 3. "You 5. You nervous?" A pause. Longer than usual. "I don't get nervous. I get precise." He smiled at the ceiling. "That's the most Victoria Sterling answer possible. I'll take that as a compliment." It was 1. He paused, then typed, "You're going to be extraordinary today." Another pause. He could feel her deciding how to receive that, the particular internal negotiation of a woman who'd spent her life deflecting softness. "Don't make me cry before 7 a.m. "Sorry. No, you're not." "No," he typed back. "I'm really not." He was at the Meridian by 9:30. The press conference wasn't until 11, but Sandra had asked him to come early. There were logistics positioning a conversation about where he'd stand and what he'd do if anyone put a microphone in his face. He wore the same suit he'd worn to the gala. It seemed right, like completing a circle. Sandra met him in the lobby. She was small and efficient, and had the energy of someone who had been awake since before 3 and considered that a personal victory. She shook his hand and walked him through the plan in under 4 minutes. "Victoria speaks," Sandra said. "Prepared statement. Then 3 questions. We've pre-selected the journalists. Nothing hostile, but don't mistake that for soft. They will push." She looked at him. "You stand behind her left shoulder. You don't speak. You don't react visibly regardless of what's said. You look like a man who has already decided everything and is completely at peace with it." "That's accurate," he said. Sandra studied him for a moment. "Good," she said, like she'd been testing him and he'd passed. Victoria arrived at 10:15. He heard her before he saw her, the particular shift in the energy of the room that happened when she entered a space, the way people reorganized themselves slightly without realizing it. She came around the corner with 2 members of her team on either side talking quietly, and then she saw him and stopped talking. She was wearing dark blue, professional, clean, exactly right. She looked like someone who had made a decision from the inside out, not dressed for the cameras, but dressed for herself, and the cameras would have to keep up. She crossed to him. Her team gave them space with the practiced discretion of people well paid to read a room. "How are you?" she asked quietly. "Good," he said. "You?" She looked at him for a moment. "Terrified," she said. "Precise. Both. Both works." "Ethan?" She said his name the way she did sometimes, like it was something she was making sure of. "Whatever they say in there, whatever angle they come from, I need you to know that what I'm about to say is the most true thing I've said in a press conference in 12 years. He held her gaze. "I know. I'm not performing this. I know, Victoria." She looked at him one more moment, then she straightened. He watched it happen. That gathering of everything she was into, the posture that walked into rooms and owned them. But this time underneath it, the real person didn't disappear. This time, they were the same thing. "Let's go," she said. The room was full. Every seat, cameras lining the back wall, the particular charged silence of a crowd that knows something consequential is about to happen. Ethan took his position behind her left shoulder and looked out at the faces and thought about nothing except breathing. Victoria walked to this podium. The cameras started immediately, the soft mechanical sound of 100 shutters. The red lights on the video cameras, the absolute focused attention of a room that had spent 2 weeks speculating and was finally about to hear it directly. She didn't pause. She didn't look down at notes. "I'm going to keep this simple," she said, "because the truth usually is." She looked directly into the cameras, not at the journalists, not at the room at the cameras, at the people watching from everywhere. "Yes, I am pregnant. Yes, the father is Ethan Brooks. We met 2 months ago, and what happened between us was not a scandal, and not a mistake, and not an irresponsible decision by a woman who should have known better." She paused exactly 1 beat. "It was 2 people choosing each other. That's it. That's the whole story." The room was completely silent. I've spent 12 years in this industry being told in various ways, and with various degrees of politeness, that a woman who leads a company must be something other than fully human to earn that leadership. She must be harder, colder, less. She must make no personal choices that invite questions. She must be a monument and not a person. Victoria's voice was even and clear and entirely without apology. "I have played by those rules for 12 years. I am done." Ethan felt something move through him. Not surprise. Recognition. "I am still the CEO of Sterling Global. I intend to remain the CEO of Sterling Global. I am also going to be a mother, and I am in a relationship with a man who is without question or qualification the most genuinely decent person I have encountered in my adult life." She didn't turn to look at him. She didn't have to. The idea that any of those facts are in conflict with each other is a premise I refuse to accept, and I'm done pretending otherwise. She stopped, looked out at the room. "I'll take 3 questions," she said. The first 2 were what Sandra had predicted, careful pushing on the board vote on her long-term strategy on the timeline of the pregnancy, and what it meant for the company. Victoria answered everything directly, concisely, without hedging. She was extraordinary. Ethan had known she would be, and it still landed with full force every time. The third question came from a journalist in the 3rd row, a woman mid-40s, a recorder held up. "Ms. Sterling," she said, "you've described Mr. Brooks as a decent person. But can you tell us what you actually mean by that, given the public perception of this relationship as unequal in certain ways?" The room went quiet in a different way. The question had teeth. Victoria looked at the woman for exactly 1 second. "Unequal how?" she said. The journalist held her ground. "In terms of financial standing, social profile, the concern that a man without money might be with me for the wrong reasons," Victoria said. Flat, clear, that's the concern. The journalist didn't answer, which was its own answer. 3 months ago, Victoria said, "My mother offered Ethan Brooks $10 million to walk away from me and our child." She paused to let that land. He left the envelope on the floor. He didn't pick it up. He didn't consider it. He left the room. Another pause. "If you want to know what I mean by decent, that's what I mean. A man who knows exactly what he's worth, and it has nothing to do with money." The shutters went. The room exhaled, and Ethan, standing behind her left shoulder, kept his face completely still because Sandra had told him to, and because he needed 2 full seconds to make sure he had enough composure to deserve the instruction. It was the hardest 2 seconds of the day. The press conference ended at 11:41. Sandra moved Victoria out of the room efficiently, and Ethan followed, and they were in a back corridor, and the door closed behind them, and the noise cut off. And for a moment, all 3 of them just stood there in the quiet. Victoria turned to look at him. "Okay," she said. "You just told a room full of cameras about the envelope," he said. "Yes." "Your PR team knew you were going to do that." She glanced at Sandra. Sandra's expression said this had not been in the prepared statement. "I made a judgment call," Victoria said. "Victoria." It was the right call. No apology. No uncertainty. "They needed to understand who you are. I told them." She held his gaze. "Do you mind?" He looked at her. At this woman who had just stood in front of 100 cameras and said the truest thing she knew and hadn't flinched once. "No," he said. I don't mind. Sandra's phone was already going. She moved a few steps away and started talking rapidly. Victoria looked at Ethan, and something in her face released just fractionally, just enough. How bad was it? She asked quietly. Being back in that building. It was fine. He meant it. I was watching you. She looked at him. You're going to have to stop doing that. Doing what? Saying things that make it difficult to maintain professional composure. He almost smiled. That's fair. Her phone went next. She looked at the screen and something shifted in her face. Not dread, something more complicated. My mother, she said. He watched her look at the phone. The call rang out. She put it in her pocket. You didn't answer, he said. I know. Victoria, not today. She said it quietly, but finally. Today is mine. I'll deal with my mother tomorrow. She looked at him steadily. Today, I want to go get Ava from school, and I want to take her somewhere she wants to go, and I want to be a normal person for 4 hours. If that's... She stopped. Something uncertain moved through her expression. If that's okay, with you, and with her, you. He looked at her for a moment. Victoria Sterling Billionaire, CEO, 20 weeks pregnant, who had just walked out of the most consequential press conference of her career and whose first instinct was to go pick up his 9-year-old daughter from school. I'll call Denise to let her know, he said. The relief on Victoria's face was quiet and real, and more honest than anything she'd said at the podium. They picked Ava up at 2:50. Ethan watched from a few feet back as Victoria stood outside the school, slightly uncertain, in a way she almost never was, hands in her coat pockets, not performing anything. And when Ava came through the doors and stopped and saw her there, something passed between them that Ethan didn't entirely have language for. 9 years old and already precise enough to read a room, Ava looked at Victoria, and then at her father, and then back at Victoria. You were on the news, Ava said. Yes, Victoria said. I didn't watch it, but everyone was talking about it. A pause. Ms. Patterson said you were brave. Ms. Patterson is generous. She's pretty accurate usually. Ava considered her. My dad said you wanted to come. I did. Why? Victoria looked at her directly. Because I wanted to be somewhere real, she said. Today had a lot of cameras. I wanted somewhere without cameras. Ava processed that with her usual precision. We're going for ice cream. Ethan looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Ethan. Sure, he said. Good, Ava said, and started walking. After exactly 3 steps, she glanced back at Victoria. Are you coming? Victoria fell into step beside her. Ethan walked on Ava's other side, and the 3 of them moved down the sidewalk together in the ordinary afternoon light, and nothing about it was small. 6 weeks later, Margaret Sterling called Ethan directly for the second time. He was in the middle of making dinner and almost let it go to voicemail. Then he thought about Victoria, about all the things Victoria was carrying simultaneously, and he answered. Mr. Brooks. The voice was the same, measured, controlled, but something underneath it was different. I'd like to meet, again. I remember how the last one went, he said. Yes. A pause. So do I. Another pause shorter. I won't bring an envelope this time. He leaned against the counter. What do you want, Mrs. Sterling? She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet he was starting to recognize, not calculation, something more uncomfortable than that. Something that didn't come easily to her. I'd like to know my grandchild, she said. He closed his eyes briefly, opened them. That's not my decision, he said. That's Victoria's. I know, I've spoken to Victoria. She said it was conditional. A pause that cost her something. She said the condition was you. He said nothing. She said I owe you an apology. Margaret continued. The words came carefully, like someone reading in a language they were still learning. She is correct. A pause. I owe you an apology, Mr. Brooks. What I did the complaint, the investigation that was wrong. I was operating from fear and I directed it badly and it was wrong. The kitchen was quiet. The city was quiet. He stood there and let the words land without rushing past them. I appreciate that, he said finally. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I'm not naive enough to expect it. I'm simply... She stopped. I made a mistake. Several. I would like to try to not make more. A long pause. Victoria loves you. I don't say that easily. I don't say anything easily. But she does. And I spent 20 years teaching her that love was a liability and Her voice shifted, just slightly. Something underneath that was almost human. I don't want to be right about that. Ethan stood in his kitchen for a moment. Thought about Victoria on a terrace with an untouched glass. Thought about the look on her face when Ava had said, I'm still deciding. Thought about what it cost a woman to carry everything alone for as long as Victoria had carried it. Call your daughter, he said. Don't call me. Call her. And when she's ready to let you in, you show up. Consistently. No conditions. No negotiations. He paused. That's the only path. A silence. Understood, Margaret said quietly. He hung up. Went back to the stove. Called Victoria 20 minutes later. Your mother called me, he said. A sharp pause. What? She apologized, directly, out loud. The silence on Victoria's end was different from any silence he'd heard from her before. Long and very still. Was it real? She asked finally, quietly. The way a person asks a question they're afraid to hope the answer to. He thought about it. Thought about the pause that had cost her something. The words coming carefully like a foreign language. I think it was the beginning of real, he said honestly. That's the best I can tell you. Another long silence. When she spoke, her voice was careful and private. She called me after. I know. We talked for 40 minutes. We haven't talked for 40 minutes in years. A pause. She's coming to the next appointment, the prenatal. I told her she could come. Another pause shorter. I don't know if that's right. It's yours to decide, he said. Whatever you decide is right. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you, she said, for talking to her. She needed to say it to someone who wasn't you, he said. You deserve to hear it second. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost something else entirely. The baby came on a Tuesday in April. 6 pounds, 11 ounces, 2 weeks early, fast enough that Ethan made it to the hospital with 11 minutes to spare and spent 9 of them in a hallway talking himself into not being visibly terrified. The 10th minute, he was in the room. The 11th minute, everything changed. He held his daughter, this new extraordinary, entirely unreasonable human being, and felt the specific gravity of it that no amount of experience prepares you for. He'd felt it with Ava 9 years ago, and it had been enormous then. It was enormous now in a different way. In the way of a second chance. In the way of a life that had been rebuilt from grief and silence, and one very specific night on a terrace, Victoria was looking at him. Her face was open in a way he'd rarely seen it, stripped of everything except the actual truth of what she felt, which was something past tired and past relieved and past any word either of them had in their vocabulary. She looks like you, Victoria said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She has your mouth, he said. She has your nose. That's unfortunate for her. He laughed. She smiled. Their daughter made a sound that was not an opinion, but felt like one. What do we call her? Victoria asked. They'd had the conversation. They'd had it multiple times. They'd had the list and the arguments and the deliberations. And now, holding this actual specific real person, Ethan looked at Victoria and said the name he'd been circling for 3 weeks without saying directly. Claire, he said, if that's okay. Victoria looked at him. Read the entirety of what that name carried, who it honored, what it meant, the love it came from, and the loss underneath it. She looked at their daughter, then back at him. "Claire," she said, like she was making it true by saying it. "Middle name is yours," he said. She thought for exactly 1 moment. "May," she said. "My grandmother's name." A pause. "She would have liked you." "Claire May Brooks," he said quietly. Victoria looked at him sharply. "Sterling Brooks," she said. "Both." He looked at her. Something moved in his chest, large and certain, and entirely without precedent. "Claire May Sterling Brooks," he said. "That's right," Victoria said. Ava met her sister that evening. She came in quietly. Denise had brought her, had waited with enormous patience in the lobby, and she stood at the side of the bed and looked at the baby with the particular solemnity of someone taking a measurement. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at Victoria. "Can I hold her?" Victoria looked at Ethan. He nodded. "Sit in the chair," Victoria said to Ava. "Like this. Support her head." Ava sat down with the precise seriousness of a child accepting a significant responsibility. Victoria placed Claire carefully into her arms. Ava looked down at her sister, this tiny, impossible new person, and something happened in her face that Ethan had only seen once before. The morning after Claire Ava's mother had died, when Ava had come into the kitchen and found him at the table and put her small hand on his arm without saying anything. That same look. That same depth of understanding that had no business belonging to a 9-year-old. "Hi," Ava said softly to her sister. "I'm Ava. I'm going to teach you everything important." A pause. "Dad knows some stuff, but I know more." Ethan made a sound. Victoria covered her mouth with one hand, and Ava looked up at her father with those eyes. Claire's eyes, her mother's eyes, steady and clear, and said simply, "She's good." Like actually. The words she had used about Victoria weeks ago in their kitchen. The same words. Applied now to this new person, this new beginning. Ethan felt something he didn't have words for move through him and come to rest somewhere permanent. He looked at Victoria. She was looking at him. Everything that had happened, the gala, the terrace, the kitchen at midnight, the envelope on the floor, the boardroom, the press conference, the apologies and the accusations and the 10,000 moments of choosing this when walking away would have been easier. All of it was in her face right now, not behind her, inside her, carried and integrated and made into something that was stronger for having been survived. She held his gaze and he held hers, and between them was everything they didn't need to say because they had already lived it. 6 months after Claire May Sterling Brooks came into the world, Victoria stood before 2,000 Sterling Global employees at the company's annual celebration. She had prepared a speech about growth metrics and the next quarter's strategy. She had it memorized. She didn't use it. Instead, she stood at the podium and looked out at the faces and said what was actually true. She talked about what she had learned in the past year. Not about business, about what was worth fighting for. About the difference between building something and building something that means something. About the particular courage it takes to be a full human being in a world that wants you to be a monument. About a man who'd walked into a press conference and stood behind her left shoulder and never said a word because he understood that some battles are hers to win, and winning them alongside someone is different from winning them alone. She talked about a 9-year-old girl who had looked at her with absolute precision and said, "I'm still deciding." And how that girl was now her daughter's fiercest, most specific, most opinionated protector. And how that trust earned slowly, honestly, without performance, was the thing she was proudest of in her entire adult life. More than any revenue number, more than any board vote. She said that the greatest thing she had built was not in this building. And she meant every word. Afterward, in the car with Ethan in the seat beside her, and both of them quiet, he said, "That wasn't the prepared speech." "No," she agreed. "Sandra's going to have something to say about that." "Sandra can send me a memo." She looked at him. Was it okay? He looked back at her. At this woman who had chosen hard things and stood in rooms and said true things and refused at every turn to be less than what she actually was. "It was perfect," he said. She nodded, turned to the window, a small private smile that was entirely for herself. Outside, the city moved past a live, indifferent enormous full of people living their ordinary lives and their extraordinary ones. The grief and the second chances, the loneliness and the chosen family, the moments that break everything open, and the ones that quietly, permanently put it back together. Ethan reached over and took her hand. She held it without looking, like she'd always known it would be there. That was the whole story. A man who had survived until he didn't have to anymore. A woman who had been powerful until she learned what power was actually for. A child who had lost something irreplaceable and found not a replacement, but something new to love on her own terms in her own time, with the complete honesty of someone who had never in her life settled for less than the truth. They had not had an easy love. They had had a real one, and real in the end was the only kind that lasts.